So today I've got a really special treat for everybody. We're actually going to bring on a panel, and we're going to talk a bit about what digital transformation means in 2020. Because it's no longer simply talking about getting companies online. It's no longer about simply developing apps. It's about how we shift towards the outcomes, how we start thinking about digital success, how we engage a global community of employees, of users, of customers. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Daisy Urfer from Onyx, Juan Paul Ramirez from Goop, John Gifford from Reddit, Jeff Eli from Intel, and Ted Borum from Morgan Stanley. Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody. I was just talking about the diversity of industries and backgrounds that we have here today, and I think going from Goop to Reddit to Morgan Stanley to Intel to integrators, I mean, it doesn't get much more diverse than this in terms of the types of industries that we're representing. But what's interesting, of course, is some of the shared problems. And we were talking about backstage that, a lot of us are trying to tackle the same challenges. So I think just kind of a way to introduce yourselves, maybe talk a little bit about your organizations and what you do, and then talk a little bit about just digital transformation and what it means to your company. So Daisy, I'll start with you.
Well, you already kind of spoke to what our big plan is for the future. Onyx has been doing search implementation since 2002, and it's really exciting to move to a collaborative environment where we're crossing the divide to solving problems. So we've incorporated our whole cloud team in developing the Fusion-ready platform as a service and able to really allow users to focus on the things they want to play with and all the fun tools within Fusion, and step away from being concerned with the infrastructure behind that.
Let me just, quick follow-up on that. So as you're moving towards, obviously, the push button, the ease of use, what Fusion Ready is really driving, there's still this other thing out there called the cloud. How is Onyx experiencing, you cross between government agencies, legacy industries, new industries. How are people perceiving this move towards the public cloud?
I think it's about stepping away from the fear of the cloud and really looking at what's behind it and how to solve a business problem and a business need. So we've partnered with AWS, Google Cloud Platform, and I think we've got 30 plus other cloud partners to provide security and DevOps behind it and really support it. So by educating, you eliminate all the fear and put the knowledge in
Back
the hands.
to that symphony, really,
yes.
now of all the different providers and all the different technologies out there and people, obviously. So Juan Paul, for you, it's sort of funny to talk about digital transformation. How old is Goop?
Well, people don't know that Goop is about to be 11 years old.
Actually, I did not.
But the first 6-7 years were run out of my boss Gwyneth's kitchen and her barn, and it was a digital-first property, but it was very manual. And the transformation for us over the last 2 years in particular has been about growing that audience from in the low tens of thousands, where even a celebrity can curate and can recommend products, knowing virtually everybody that's receiving that content, and trying to get that out to an audience, in the tens of millions, where you still don't want to lose that personal touch. You want to make sure that machines can nominate, but humans can validate the content that we have. And as a lifestyle brand, that content can vary from the traditional e-commerce of products that we build off of the credibility of the brand, and into things like food and travel and wellness in general. So it's less or so about building just hard and fast recommendation engines, and much more about making sure that we still feel like we have that personal touch with 20 to 30 million people a year.
Awesome. And John, I guess the same for you. You all are a small web property somewhere out in San Francisco. How do you think about the word digital transformation in the context of something like Reddit?
Yeah, so Reddit's fundamental goal is to help people find their community and participate. So, and we've been obviously digital for our entire life. But I think, as anyone who's ever worked in a startup knows, there's a sort of a rush to get something out, and then there's sort of phases of consolidation and evolution, and we are sort of still in that mode. So I would say that for us, digital transformation is more around getting better at being able to share, like break down the silos, I guess is the best way to put it, is we want to be able to leverage the fact that we have a bunch of data science people who focus on things like abuse. And so they generate a lot of data about our content and our users, or our users' behavior, I guess, that we don't use outside of that area. But that could potentially be incredibly valuable if we could. So I think that for us it's around making sure that we build a platform that lets us leverage all of that.
Now, you mentioned the rush, right? I think a lot of us feel the pressure. I think, especially with the workforce today that wants to feel like they're working on the latest and greatest. I mean, your user community is known to be somewhat vocal. And so I imagine breaking things isn't always a good idea. Dramatically changing things overnight can have an impact. What's the balance between the rush and doing things in sort of a controlled and predictable fashion? I mean, how does Reddit think about that problem?
So for us, we bring that back to our users. They are the thing that make Reddit great. And so whenever we are thinking about making any change, we think about how it's going to impact our users and what they're going to get out of it, and also how they can leverage it to do things that we can't think of, right? There's a lot of the best stuff on Reddit is stuff that no one at Reddit ever thought about when they were building. Like, they deploy some little product tweak and suddenly there's an entire community built around it and doing, meme trading. Who would have predicted that, right? So our customers are sort of engines of innovations themselves, and our job is to kind of help them do that.
Awesome. And Jeff, I mean, digital transformation and Intel, I feel like you all are somewhat of the pioneers. And so again, here we are in 2019, it's almost 2020. I mean, what's digital transformation mean for Intel in this decade, in this era?
Yeah, we really started as a hardware company, of course, for a 50-year anniversary last year, so we've been around a long time. But before it was chips and processors, and now we moved to a data-driven company. Data centers are a big deal, and the data that drives the world. And internally, IT had been the driver of a digital transformation over the last year or two. When we finally got the entire organization aware of the experience of the employee and the expectation of the worker around this, so bringing in HR, corporate services, finance, all the ways to work within the company. It was very siloed before and based on different goals and objectives, and now the transformation piece of it all is kind of bringing all that stuff together. It's got to be easier to find stuff and work in such a large global company in the way we are. It's just critical to find that information and deliver it more effectively than we have before.
Awesome. And Ted, I mean, similar question. I mean, Morgan Stanley obviously has been around for a while. I don't think people tend to not correlate financial services with like fast-moving innovation yet. I have worked very closely with you over at Morgan Stanley, and you all are typically at the cutting edge, if not over the edge, in terms of some of your innovations. What do you think about in terms of digital transformation and how Morgan Stanley is viewing that going into this next decade?
And you hit it on the head. We're a finance shop. But yet we are at the forefront of technology and utilizing the digital transformation, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Client interaction for our staff is critical. Being able to interact with those clients with actionable information is even more important. We don't want to just reach out to a client and say, how are you doing today? We actually want to facilitate a conversation which could lead to a closer relationship with our staff. Additionally, we have internal staff that requires information. And what has already been said is being able to provide that information when they want it is very key. So utilizing search and AI to provide internal information is as important as information that ultimately will reach to our clients.
And I imagine it's interesting. I mean, you're dealing with sensitive information. I mean, people's financial positions, portfolios. I imagine I can't walk through Morgan Stanley and just see dashboards of all the user behavior everywhere. Where does regulation and restriction sort of intersect with the need to, kind of similar to John, where you want to move quickly, you want to get things out fast, yet you've kind of have this whole other barrier that you need to think about, right?
Protection of our data is key. And being able to have access to our data is restricted not only for a purpose of what Morgan Stanley is and the reputation that we have to uphold, but also because of regulations. So internally with IT, the data that we use, we generally don't see. It's very, very private. But allowing that data into the hands of those that can use it, specific data for our staff to action on that data is what we do. And utilizing the algorithms to make sure that that occurs and that things do not cross is very critical.
Absolutely. So putting those barriers in place, having those policies in place, incredibly important. So think about a little bit, move towards sort of the workers. So Jeff, it's interesting. I mean, you support a fairly significant, a very significant global workforce. I imagine that, the generations of folks span quite heavily, the expectations span. How do you think about engaging those employees through technology? What's a measure of success for you?
Yeah, it's tough. Being around so long, we have employees that have been forever with us that have very low expectations on maybe mobile usage and collaboration capabilities. They kind of do the old way they work with, and new workers coming in demanding more and being smarter about what we know about them. And being smarter means we know a little bit more and we can deliver things more effectively. And the balance between when you have 110,000 employees and add on 90,000 contractors and spread those around 80 major sites around the world, the balance of what is valuable and helpful versus what is creepy and stalking is a fine line. And so, people work here at the European Union controls and everything. Their expectation is much different than maybe some of the Asian countries and China about people are aware that data is used more freely, and why aren't we doing more of these things? And so it's an evolutionary pace to try to figure out what is acceptable or not. It changes pretty rapidly. Over the last couple of years, things we're doing now 2 years ago we would have never done. And so we're kind of bringing people along with an evolutionary pace and kind of the way the external world is working as well. But it's a fine line to balance that value, what you can provide, and bringing people along with it to accept that level of assistance and awareness.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because of all these aspirations that we talk about. Nothing's more frustrating, again, when I can't find something, when my intent gets completely mismanaged. At the same time, sometimes when it works perfectly, it gets creepy. And so I can imagine there's certain sensitivities in the workplace. I mean, Juan Paul, thinking about your industry where you're really at the intersection of self-care, of healthcare. I mean, these are incredibly sensitive and personal topics. But at the same time, what I find fascinating about Goop is it's the combination of product that I can go and I can engage and I can buy, typical e-commerce, and then content. And so you're really intersecting, lots of information that is very valuable to me, yet very personal to me. What's the line? How do you balance between that convenience and that creepy factor?
Yeah, well, the restrictions and regulations we take at utmost seriousness, but more important to us is really the relationship and the trust between the brand and our audience. Think about when a machine can guess what the next product or what an article, or it seems like it's been eavesdropping in your conversations, that feels creepy. But when your friend knows exactly what you want for dinner, or your friend can put together something, a trip or an itinerary, it feels comfortable. And that's the type of relationship we're looking to have. It turns out when you make every choice count, you don't want 15 choices of where to eat. You want one plate for dinner, you want it to be delicious, and hopefully it's good for you. And so if we can take that brand trust, that credibility, and pose it in ways that make it feel familiar, make it feel like you're talking to a friend, like you're having a two-way conversation, that's when we succeed. We have products, as you mentioned, that span from wellness supplements that go from prenatal care to perimenopause supplements. Those are very intimate, very private conversations we have with our audience. We make sure to treat those with the utmost secrecy and privacy, and then apply those same rules to when they're planning a trip or an itinerary for a trip to New York City. We don't tend to retarget or follow our users along with what they've told us because we feel like if we validate that trust, then they won't come back. And that matters more to us than just the constraints of the regulation.
So then what's, like how do you measure success when you don't have that confirmatory, engagement measurement that other ad tracking and other technologies might deploy? What's success mean for you?
Yeah, slightly different for us given that we're a content provider and e-commerce, but we'll look at things like time on site, we'll look at things at recipe printing, we'll look at things like return visitation within a 30-day period, we'll look at things like newsletter signups. There are different conversion points to Goop than just the purchases. When we follow those and we know that the consumer is, or the audience is really engaging with us, the rest of the metrics tend to follow along. If we can build that trust for them, first with content, which is entirely free and applicable to anybody in the audience, then the rest of the procedures will follow. They will come through, and if you tell them the 10 best sunscreens for themselves and for their family, they will buy one from you, even if it's comparable to somewhere that you might find somewhere else.
Fascinating. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about challenges. So Daisy, I mean, you all work with hundreds of customers. Everybody's got aspirations. We were joking before that every customer you sit with says, just make it like Google. And I tell them, just go sign up 1 billion users and you'll be there tomorrow. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the obstacles that you're seeing across the different industries and agencies that you all are working with?
Again, I think it all runs back to fear. So they want it to be like Google, but they also have this fear of what the media puts together as this AI is a dystopian universe where robots are taking over. And really, it's going back to the core of the problem. We do a lot of discovery conversations and actually working really hard to uncover what the core of the problem is that we can solve with AI. When you can focus on what problems you're solving and deliverables, you can really see the benefits and the outcomes.
And has there been a shift in maybe urgency over the last sort of few years in terms of people were kind of resisting, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, we're too late. We need to jump on it, or how do you see that evolution?
That's a little bit of a challenge. I mean, so we were a Google Search Appliance house for such a long time that we had this huge urgency for 2 years of massively replacing what they knew. Now what we see is a timidness, but then a, wait, I want to do it now. Now that I have the knowledge, I want to go now. But it's really getting there and just having those conversations to identify what that looks like for each customer and then their users.
Awesome. And Ted, same question to you around just some of the obstacles. I mean, again, you're talking about one of the most heavily regulated industries, yet the need to compete. I mean, I can't walk down the streets of San Francisco without seeing another fintech company that thinks a robot's going to manage finances and retirement accounts and savings accounts. So what are some of the challenges that you see at the bank that you need to overcome on a daily basis?
You talk about make it like Google. And if I had a nickel for every time I heard that from my client base, I think I'd be rich myself. But the interesting thing is, though, what are they saying? What are they actually saying when they say that? They want to be able to get information and have the tool provide that information to the point where they can improve the relevancy, where they could actually get the information they're looking for from the engine. From an internal and an external perspective for our clients, it's the same thing. But that information has to be what's pertinent to them and what's critical for them. And again, we have to make sure that the information that we provide is within the realms of the information that they should actually see. So it's the same thing, we put the gates up, but we have to make sure that what we're exposing is actually what the users are.
Striking that balance.
Yes.
So John, I'm going to flip over to you again, and just again, we think about Reddit, we think about high tech, we think about cutting edge, but what is it that you see in terms of either transformation that's occurring or the opportunities for things like search and AI and the impact that they're going to have on Reddit going forward?
So I think there's a few pretty clear ones. One is that we have a lot of data at Reddit that we're just not using, just because of reasons, history. Different teams get spun up to try and solve a problem, and they run sort of independently of the rest of the company. They share some infrastructure, but they'll often go off and do their own thing. Like the obvious one is just to kind of try and bring all of that together. I think the other big one is going back to just be Google. For Reddit, that would be, the end of the world, because the whole point of Reddit is that there are 1 million conversations, and there are 100 about any specific topic. So if we were to try and find the perfect conversation about whatever topic happens to be trending right now, and completely ignore the other 99, I think it would be a terrible Reddit experience, because you want that diversity, you want the differences to be visible. We talk a lot internally about diversity, and so we have subreddits that span any continuum you can think of. Politics is probably the easiest for people to understand. It's, we have hard left, hard right, people in the middle, and they are all talking about the same things in totally different ways, right? And so we want to surface that, because we think that that's more important than sort of building a little bubble where you can only hear the things that you agree with. And I think that the last one is one that is going to become increasingly important to us, which is internationalization. So Reddit is currently fairly heavily biased towards the US, right, and English speaking in general. But we know that we have a ton of customers outside of that little sphere. And so when we do things like think about how do we present Reddit to someone in Nigeria versus someone in India versus someone in Brazil, it's a tough problem, because there may just not be enough content to do the equivalent of our popular for a specific country. There are obviously cases where that's not true, where we have enough users to be able to do that, but that's something that we're sort of working towards now, and that's going to be a big challenge.
And doing these things at a massive scale,
yeah,
obviously,
exactly.
as you're rolling them out.
Yeah.
And speaking of scale, Jeff, it's interesting to me when we think about workplace applications, we think about employee engagement. I think most of us have a model in our head that says, okay, well, scale may not be the problem. It's more about precision in that. Yet, you all have quite a few employees. I mean, so this isn't quite just a simple departmental level problem. So how does that work at Intel? How do you think about that?
Yeah, the challenge for us too is that we're a technology company through and through. And so at the campus I work at alone in Portland, we have more PhDs at that campus in my own office than the top 5 universities in the US combined. So that's just our campus. So we've got a lot of smart people that are going to tell you a lot of better ways to do it than you're doing it. So with that kind of guidance and feedback, the expectation is to go faster and bigger. Help me more on this. They're working on AI on the chip side. They're working on the design side, the technology side. They're selling AI that we should do better than this. And so the pace to move with some of that technology development towards the balance of everything else. It's a mixture of people around the world. We have people assembling product together along with these advanced technology people. But really the expectation is that you've got to deliver more than just results. It can't just be a list and a page, even beyond Google. That's unacceptable. It's got to know who I am, by persona, by security. Show me a result that tells me about this product, where it is in the launch cycle, how things are falling behind, KPIs, but it already knows my security and what I should be able to see, and change that result kind of dynamically based on who I am. We're bringing a lot of external executives recently. Again, companies evolving, been around for decades now, bringing in a lot of external people. They're saying, why don't you have these things in place? Well, of course, you have a lot of legacy. We're a large company. It's harder to scale on these kind of things. But the expectation is so much higher on what that result should look like. Into machine learning and AI, we've had a lot of pockets internally. Why aren't we making people more productive? And that's really been the challenge of getting that productivity level up using some of these same tools that they're using on the products they deliver to everybody else out there.
Awesome. And well, Paul, I'm going to switch back to you. So again, I mean, the intersection of content and catalog, I mean, it provides a unique opportunity. What do you think some of the things that you're looking forward to in the future, in terms of just Goop's initiatives, in terms of the technology trends that you're seeing?
Well, I think your choice of words is perfect. It's look forward. We're probably all here in this room because we're trying to match content with intent. At Goop, our challenge is trying to match content with intent that doesn't exist yet. We consider ourselves pioneers in terms like clean beauty, in terms like glowing skin, because we were there 5-6 years ago and built a library of content before we built the catalog of product. Our goal is to look at trends that exist now and make them into evergreen topics that could exist forever, and own that space, and particularly know what the audience sort of desires or needs before they do, and be able to define pockets of areas where we just want to solve problems. It may come through product, it may come through content, it may come through the distribution of word or the access to things that aspirationally others don't have access to. That's where we're using our machinery to go where the ball is going rather than where the ball is now.
Awesome. And just in terms of looking forward, I mean, Daisy, what are some of the things that folks are now coming to you for the future? Like, what do you feel is some of the trends that you're seeing? I mean, we talked a bit about, obviously, just the digital transformation, getting off of a GSA, moving to cloud, but are there other emerging topics that are kind of coming into your conversations with clients?
I mean, a huge part of it is the mass amount of data that we're creating every single day as a society, really. And so, I mean, around 40% of an employee's time is actually spent searching unsuccessfully and then recreating content. So it's recreating additional data to search and crawl. So how do we find that data initially and eliminate that extra task, saving that time and resource for the customer and the employee and the whole environment, and then utilizing that data better to really streamline AI.
Awesome. So just making use. It's always, we used to be collecting, and now they want to actually do something with it. Go figure.
Yeah.
So Ted, I'm going to pose the same question to you. I mean, you talked about the need to compete and the agility. I mean, what is it that you feel that, you know, despite the Google request, that, and I loved your answer there, that, you know, you really got to kind of double click on that and understand, you know, exactly what they mean by that. But what are some of the emerging topics and trends that your internal customers are coming to you for that you're seeing emerge?
And very similarly, we have a lot of content. And getting at that content in multiple ways is very key. We're looking at question answer systems. We're looking at chatbots to be able to assist our staff, internal, external, to get the information that they require. Part of the difficulty is the stale content and managing the content that's been around for years, which I'm sure we all have that challenge. Having tool sets around that to be able to sort of traverse that and crawl that and sort of eliminate that when we do our searches goes a long way. And we're working very well towards that, and hopefully we'll be completing that very shortly. So those are the type of things that we're looking forward to and using this technology.
Awesome. So one final question for the panel. So you've got all these folks here. Again, they're at the cutting edge. They're driving innovation in open source technologies and AI technologies. So what do you want to ask them for? What is the number one ask for this community that what you'd like to see when we come back to Activate next year? Either somebody's solved or presenting on, and I can go either way. Ted, you spoke last. We'll go back to Daisy here, and then we'll work our way down.
Yes. Tough question, Will.
That one was on the fly, by the way.
I see how this goes. You know, I think I want to see more of that cloud collaboration. We have all these different partners. Everybody's doing all these different little pieces. And I'd really love to see how many other things we can unite by next year.
Very cool. How about you, John Paul?
Yeah, I think what the developer community can really provide companies like Goop and companies of our size is just knowing what else exists in the white space that we haven't even looked into, particularly with whether it's machine learning or AI. We're always prejudiced a bit when we go into how we can optimize our site experience, how we can optimize our checkout flow, our e-commerce experience. What I would love to see is how we can use the data out there across multiple industries, across multiple players, to find optimizations that people aren't talking about yet. Everybody does A/B testing, everybody does multivariate across everything you do on your phone or across everything you do on your desktop. What are the variables we haven't introduced into multivariate yet? And not device type, not time of day, not geography. What are the variables that have some strong signal that lead to loyalty to a brand that haven't been interpreted yet? That would be something super compelling for us.
Awesome. How about you, John?
Mine's pretty simple. I think it's all about performance. And anyone who's been around Lucene for a while knows that has been a continuing theme, and that it's continuously getting better, particularly at scale. And for us, you know, that is one of the big things. But I'm not talking about Lucene here specifically. I'm talking about if we plug ML models in, we want them to perform at the same level or as close as they can be to just plain old TF-IDF, right? I think that there's a lot of pent-up demand to be able to just drop in an ML model to do re-ranking and have it be hyper-performant. So that's really, and at our scale, that really matters because we want to be able to deliver the best content that we have as quickly as possible. We don't want to have to rely on caching because then stuff kind of drifts out of, it becomes not relevant.
Exactly.
So.
Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, for me, we have every software product in the world. We buy all sorts of things, of course. And so the confusion is just the complexity of it all. And so my big focus is on experience side of things and the employee experience and the user experience. We've got plenty of tools out there. How do you make that easier? Everyone wants it easier. Better value, but easier. And so, I'd love to, I'm a manage a team of developers. I'm an innovation person at heart about where are we going. This space is just evolving to me and where we're going. AI, machine learning, we're doing a lot of kind of stuff internally, but it's all still in pockets. And how do you bring that together to make it kind of seamless and easier to work with and a better experience overall? And that's what I'm looking for. How are people doing that well in their organizations?
Got it. Ted.
2 words, data security. How do I make that much easier? How do I control that? How can I make sure that the data that I have is getting to the right hands and being able to provide software, hardware, however we need to do it, but being able to provide that is key.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all. This has been fantastic, and thanks for joining us up here. And yeah, with that, we will move on. So, appreciate it. So, once again, just really, really cool to hear from just across all of these different industry types, all these different backgrounds.